you guys know on the show, we like to report on things that generally aren't covered, stuff that slips through the cracks. We know that we know that recently Trump put yet another $10 billion of funding into weapons, and he put the bill on NATO, keeps basically imitating Biden's policy. Everything he ran on, he's doing the opposite. They're still doing it. They're funneling the money. It's not sustainable. We know Zelensky might be on his way out. Well, here's another example of why it's pretty clear that Zelensky is on his way out. Now, is that going to mean the thing's going to end? Maybe not. But this is happening right now. We saw this. BBC, CNN, MSNBC, none of them are covering what's happening in Ukraine right now.
About 40,000 people in the streets right now, I heard.
Here it is. Got it right here. This is against Zelensky's regime in Ukraine, and it's in the day 2 already. So this is the protesters. They want him out. This is happening right now outside of Zelensky's office. Check it out. Do you think MSNBC, CNN, Fox, do you think they're going to get somebody on this? Or maybe there's just too much going on. Otherwise, they don't have enough time in their 24-hour cycle, Jay. They can't cover everything, right? Not this.
No. It's more important, we talk about what Donald Trump, is saying on the podium and how he's, threatening and bribing people. So, but I truly think in order for people to, understand the gravity of the situation, we also have to recognize, right, that we've almost become desensitized to war again, I would argue, because it's happening so much now in Israel, in the Middle East. And even though we don't have troops on the ground, I guess, we're so far away from what's actually happening over there that sometimes we forget like what the actual risks are. And in addition to these mass protests that are happening right now, in my opinion, part of the reason you're seeing that is because it's become, increasingly obvious that there is no path to victory, for Ukraine, and they're losing more and more territory fast. In fact, right now, as we speak, the last road to Pokrovsk, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but it's a city over in the Donbass region in Ukraine, is the last road to there is being cut off by the Russians at the moment. It's an important, it's an important strategic city that is gonna, that is essentially Ukraine can't afford to lose at this point. And they're about to lose it, in addition to all the other, challenges they're dealing with. They have trouble recruiting enough men. They're running out of ammos and missiles. And, what we're seeing right now is honestly desperation, like coming from the West too. So do I think Zelensky is out, and will it make a difference in the overall strategy, even if he is? I don't know if he's going to be switched out or not, but I know it seems like there's really no viable faction in Ukraine that we would work with who want to end the war. So I personally don't know if it would make that much of a difference, because the people who were in power, like, they're the ones like I don't see them really changing direction, even if there is a coup. But I hope I'm wrong on that. And one thing I just want people to know real quick, then I'll hand it back to you. There are, like, Ukraine is trying to claim right now that it is able to build its own missiles in Ukraine that are based on Russian technology. However, they have to be shipped from Germany to Ukraine for some reason. But trust me, they were originally built like in Ukraine. And that's the story they're coming up with, because Germany wants plausible deniability about providing them Taurus missiles, which are extremely powerful long-range missiles that they're about to give to Ukraine. They're trying to pretend that Ukraine is building it on their own. And unfortunately, the reason they're pretending is because they know when they fire these missiles at Russia, which it seems they are gearing up to do, if they land, there's a chance that Germany could be blamed for that. And Russia has already said that the West, like, Ukraine cannot fire these missiles without us giving them our technology. So we are a party like to this war. And they've already said, if Moscow gets hit, If some of their cities on Russian territory gets hit, then the West is not off limits. They're not committed to only limiting their response to Ukraine. So we do have an increasing sense of urgency, in my opinion, for this war. And really quick, I'll hand it back to you. For anyone who wants more information on what I just described, go check out the Duran on YouTube. It's a great channel, really detailed coverage. That's where I get a lot of my Ukraine news from. So I'm kind of repackaging and, resharing some of the info I had learned from them, as well as a few other sources, but check them out.
So, Jay, I'm looking at this from it could be, there could be something else going on here. And I think that we look at Israel as kind of it's another blueprint where you can keep manufactured consent if you blame the problem on the leader, and then you look for ways to switch them out so you can go a little further. You can just get a little more manufactured consent to keep a little more, like you're mentioning about the missiles and that we are obviously the ones doing this. Zelensky is a puppet in this situation. We've known that the whole time. But what if this is about doing a switch up just so the public will be like, well, Zelensky was the problem. Now we're okay with more weapons. Now we're okay with more Ukrainian deaths. And I'm only suggesting that because, well, first of all, Jamie also, he put this out, and I kind of agree with this because I think this might be a CIA protest that's sparking this protest. And I'll follow up with that suggestion, Jamie. I would say this: we're seeing journalists on the ground in Ukraine who've had they've had the social media flag, they've had the Ukraine flag in their social forever for the last 3 years. They're saying we got to get rid of Zelensky. And so that's a sign to me. They're not saying end the war. They're saying this guy is taking the money and he's extorting it. So listen, this is one of those journalists. She's urging us to revolt against Zelensky, not against the war, against Zelensky. Check this.
Zelensky doesn't respect anyone, not us Ukrainians, not you Americans, not Europeans. He doesn't care what you think. You are paying him from your own pockets, and he's stealing your money. What happens in Ukraine decides whether a big war will start in Europe. But Zelensky wants to keep spending your money and stop you from even checking how it's used. He's destroying the anti-corruption agencies you created with your money, $500 million. Here's what I want to say to people in the US and EU. You might not like what I'm about to say, but it's truth. He doesn't respect you, not the citizens of the US, the EU, or the UK.
Okay, so, and he thinks you're a fool. So listen, this to me looks like you have this establishment journalist doing propaganda for 3 years about why we have to stop Putin from taking over the world. And now all of a sudden she's saying, let's stop this uniquely bad, corrupt guy who I guess is responsible for this type of stuff. This is Zelensky's fault, right? This is, and we've seen this. This is Zelensky's fault that all this money just turns up, this cash with no paper trail. If you get rid of him, we can get back to business as usual, where the money's going to the right spot. So, Jay, I think there's a chance here that this is just another attempt to change the narrative of who the problem is, to keep people on board and keep those, by the way, keep those Ukrainian flags in your social. That journalist who just told you to be skeptical of Zelensky and fight back against him, she still has the Ukrainian flag in her social because she's still pushing this BS that Putin's going to take over the world. We got to keep sending money.
Yeah, I can't, dismiss that opinion. It's definitely, a viable possibility of what could be happening over here. My only, I guess, question I would have is, you pointed out earlier that they're not reporting on these protests in the mainstream media, whereas in 2014, when they had the original Maidan coup where we installed our own puppets in Ukraine, they were actually covering the protests a lot over here in the West because they wanted to highlight, that the protests, democracy is winning. So, I feel like, in my opinion, would they definitely push it on this side? I can see reasons why maybe they want to keep it under wraps, because the more people know about how turbulent the situation is over there, the less we may want to fund it. So I'm not saying for sure that the possibility can't be what's happening. I really don't know, but I don't think it matters that much, because no matter who's the leader of Ukraine, like, we are currently using Ukraine as a proxy to try to weaken Russia, and Russia's allies with our other two targets. So it does make sense to try to keep them distracted as long as possible if your goal is to enrich the establishment and, waste the taxpayers' money, which I think it is. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, we'll certainly keep an eye on this, and I appreciate us. I mean, we've been having these very thoughtful discussions the whole way, but the point is, I think we can all agree on is that we need to figure out a way to end this thing. And it's clear that the people in power don't want that to happen at all, as we've seen Trump demonstrate that 180 of, I'm going to end it on the first 24 hours to $10 more billion to weapons. But NATO's going to front the bill this time, not us. So yeah.
The only difference in Ukraine policy between Trump and Biden is Biden confidently went along the warpath, and Trump is just taking stutter steps, along the same warpath and pretending he doesn't want to do it, but always ends up doing the exact same thing. So, lesser of two evils. That's what we got.